I've talked about a lot of arcade stuff on here, from the Astro City to netbooting Naomi and Atomic Wave games on the Blast City. More recently, some Capcom Big Blue Cabinet overviews, and even chiseling dead rats out of my virtual racing machine. All of that has gone on, and I've never taken time to really show my Neo Geo 4 slot. On this channel of all channels, we've never really looked at it, so I don't know how that is, but let's take a look at that today. So to start with, this is an MVS 25-4, affectionately known as a Big Red. As the name suggests, it is a tall machine that really makes its presence known by its stature, unmistakable red coloring, and of course, these front-facing stereo speakers that could broadcast game sounds across an arcade room floor. The seller listed this machine as 100% working, which I found out was not really the case. Now, I've had a friend tell me I was just the wrong person to say that to, but if you're going to use the term 100%, that kind of alludes to all the fine details in my opinion, and otherwise you would just say it was working. Alright, the first of those details is the mini marquee lights. They didn't work on this machine. Now that's not an uncommon issue given the age of these, but I would argue it's an important detail on a cabinet like this. After all, cycling through games with the select button is a pretty big feature of the multi-slot cabinet, and seeing a game's mini marquee light up is a defining feature. This can thankfully be a relatively easy fix. There's a company called Glowhut that sells these A6 sized EL panels which happen to fit pretty well onto this lighted display. It's been a few years since I've installed them, but as I recall, it was really easy to solder these on. I do remember replacing the first one and turning the machine on and it didn't light, and at that point I pulled the PCB that controls these and found a fried resistor that also needed to be replaced. Once I found out what type of resistor that actually was and replaced it, I turned the machine on and saw that my newly installed Glowhut panel lit. I went ahead and replaced the remaining 3. Now these are a little larger than the originals, so you might want to mask the top or even edges with some black electrical tape to avoid light bleed. Just above the mini marquees you can see the front-facing speakers. These actually sound okay and do a decent job projecting audio the way I recall. They aren't super crisp though, and I've considered replacing them with something higher quality a few times, but I've just not gotten around to committing to that idea yet. Also of note here is that when I first got this, audio only came out of one of these speakers. Another one of those finer details that was conveniently missed by the seller. Now, one of the most important features of an arcade machine is its monitor. It's generally the first thing I tell anyone buying their first machine to be aware of because they can be intimidating and tedious to fix if they're not working properly. Now, the seller of this machine said the monitor was completely rebuilt, but once again, I don't think that was really the case here. This is a Wells Gardner K7000 chassis, specifically the one that was originally inside my 4 slot. I really don't believe that this was even recapped, and the flyback is an original white dial. Now, there is some debate about the failure rate on the white dials. Some people replace them immediately and feel like that's the best preventative care. Others ride it out and seem to think it's fine to roll with them provided everything is working properly. I wish I had video from when this was actually plugged in because I had some lines across the top of the picture and some banding on the left side of the screen. I don't have either of those things going on now, and the picture actually looks really good on the 25-inch monitor. I came into possession of another K7000 chassis in early 2020. I recapped it and put a new flyback on it, and this is the result. It's damn near perfection. At some point, I'll recap the one that I pulled and have a spare ready to go. This is the same monitor used in Big Blue, so it's not a bad idea to have a backup for 2 of my best machines. Less exciting, but still monitor related, the original monitor shroud was ratty and faded, so I simply used it as a pattern to trace and cut a new one from black cardboard. Did the same thing for Big Blue, if you guys recall that. Alright, control panel. Overall, not too bad looking. This is a real bright spot for the cabinet, and I have to tell you though, I've cycled through several different types of buttons until landing on ones that I like. These are convex ILs with the D44X micro switches. Obviously, concave buttons would be more authentic here, and I can always swap back to those if I want, but the convex ILs just feel so much better when playing Neo games. I did manage to save the original sticks for this machine, although they're a little rough. Rehabbing them is another project on my list that I'd like to take on at some point, but for now, using the IL Euro joysticks in the cabinet is how I roll. Definitely my preferred arcade stick. I use them in both Big Blue and my Virtua Fighter. Another cool feature on top of the control panel is the lighted credit display. My machine is always on free play, so I don't get to see this change too frequently, but I do think it's cool, and another one of those things that just is a defining characteristic of the Big Red. On the very front of the control panel is a memory card slot for the machine. This was a cool feature for saving your arcade games and picking them up at a later time. To be honest though, like most things Neo Geo, I didn't know of anyone who was taking advantage of this back in the day though. You also have 2 headphone jacks available on the front panel, which is pretty cool. Now, normally there would be a plate over top of this highlighting the memory card and the headphone jacks. My cabinet was missing this, and so I had to print a reproduction sticker for my cabinet. If you reach behind and up through the coin door, there are 2 latches to release that allow the control panel to then flip forward. And once we do that, here you can see the wiring to the controls as well as the PCB for the memory card slot we just talked about. The remote board for the monitor sits off to the side here, so we can easily make adjustments to the monitor. The pots on this are really sensitive and a little scratchy, so at some point I'll probably have to redo those as well. And oh yeah, here is what I would consider the heart of the Neo Geo, the 4-slot motherboard that plays host to your games. I don't think this concept is foreign to anyone who watches the channel, but yeah, the game cartridges just plug directly into the board in the same way a cartridge would to a console, making this very easy to change games out. This was a very desirable feature for technicians and operators back in the day. I mentioned earlier that I only had sound coming out of one speaker, and that's because there was a scratch across the motherboard that cut one of the audio channels running to the non-JAMA edge here. Once I applied a jumper wire to the board, sound was restored to that speaker. So you probably noticed the red glow while looking at the motherboard, and that was coming from these LED coin door lights I installed inside of the cabinet. You could definitely go white, which is more original, but I kind of like how the red illuminates the external reject buttons and also simultaneously gives a red glow to the inside when the cabinet is open. You can also see through this door we have access to the test and service switches as well as the main AC line. Finally, on the very bottom of the cabinet is the coin bucket. This doesn't see many tokens or quarters today since I have the unit on free play, but it is a good place to store any items that are directly related to the machine. It makes finding things a lot easier when the time comes. And that's my Neo Geo Big Red cabinet. Overall, this is in pretty great shape both cosmetically and functionally. It has a few dings and scratches here and there, but nothing overly detrimental or glaring. It definitely needs a few things to get it completely fixed up and fully 100% working. But in many ways, it was also a good lesson in buying a machine and learning about arcade cabinets. This purchase really pushed me to do some research and a lot of reading across various forums. There's a wealth of information out there, and for any issue that you may encounter, well, you're likely not the first person to be facing that problem. I think I was really hoping to have cleaned up my basement and have some walls up before filming the Big Red here, but given current state of things, I don't know when that's going to happen, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video, even if the aesthetic is still looking a little dungeony down there. As always, I appreciate your feedback and questions. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you all next time. Later, guys.